Welcome to another episode of God and the Paranormal. Thanks for joining me. I'm John. Suzanne will be back with us on the next episode. This is another of our shorter broadcasts. We usually move quickly and cover a lot of content, which means we seem to always leave ideas hanging. So this is kind of a catch-up for some earlier ideas we brought up. Probably my favorite radio personality of all time, Paul Harvey, did a commentary in 1965 called If I Were the Devil. I recommend that if you can, try to find this on YouTube or somewhere. It's a very interesting broadcast. It is a short recording. Harvey hypothesizes what he would do if he had Satan's job. Here are some excerpts, quoting Harvey here. If I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate, 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I seized the ripest apple on the tree, you. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves until each in turn was consumed. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbols of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. So, that's Paul Harvey from 1965. Very creative and prophetic, I think. He preemptively hypothesized or predicted what he thought Satan might do, and then he allowed the audience to hold these predictions up to real-world events to see how close they were. So if you've listened to our podcast, you'll know we attempt to do something similar with what we call the Ephesians Hypothesis. We base this on the Apostle Paul's warning in Ephesians 6. I'll start with verse 11. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. And so here's our reasoning on this. If this passage in Scripture is true, and by the way, we're not doubting that it is, we're just setting it up as a testable hypothesis, much like what a quantum physicist would do in testing unseeable realities. So if we look at this description of the unseen realm as a valid hypothesis, can we make predictions about how it would express itself in the physical world? And our belief is that we can do this. We can compare what we observe as data in this world to our expectations and predictions based on what Scripture says about spiritual warfare. And if you want a full discussion of this, you can go back all the way to episode 4. But these are the basics of what we concluded. So I believe Paul's hypothesis in Ephesians 6 lays out 5 truths about reality. Number 1, there really is an unseen realm just beyond the one in which we live. The universe we see is not the complete universe. 2, spirits from that unseen realm can and do interact with our world. And very important here, these spirits are the ones described in Scripture, nothing else. 3rd, our primary struggle is with fallen spirits from this unseen realm. They play a significant role in our daily affairs, even though we may not realize it or even accept it. 4, these fallen spirits, of which Paul warns us, are evil, scheming, and set on opposing God's kingdom in every way possible, which in this physical realm means attacking God's children through deceptions and lies that give us false beliefs about the nature of God and the spirit world and our interpretation of what we see as physical reality. And 5th, The passage makes the strong suggestion that we can and should be prepared to recognize and withstand these fallen spirits. So, considering all these realities, what are some effects we would expect to observe in our physical world? Now, obviously, there are many ways this battle is being waged, multitudes of deceptions, false beliefs, but this podcast concentrates specifically on how deceptions involve our belief about the supernatural paranormal realm, ideas that are permeating our society right now, and they're becoming more popular despite what science and naturalists are trying to teach us. Over the past few episodes, Suzanne and I have examined a range of paranormal phenomena. The three main categories that we've looked at are still the same, though. Ghost phenomena, including alleged apparitions in general, such as shadow people, black-eyed children, doppelgangers, and things like that. UFO, ET abduction experiences. And third, cryptid creatures, including Bigfoot, dogman, skinwalkers, and just a whole bunch of others. And we could also mention other phenomena such as remote viewing, demon possession, magic, psychic abilities, near-death experiences, past lives, and the list goes on. When we back up to get a broad view of these with as much inclusivity as possible, here are some obvious facts I think we'll find. There's a lot of high strangeness on a tiny little rock in an average star system in its huge universe. And not just any high strangeness, a diversity of high strangeness. And I think our first possibility is to ask the question, are humans just really gullible or fanciful or confused? And as we've said many times, that's likely the case for a large number of the phenomena that we do see and call supernatural or paranormal. We could leave it at that, but we keep coming back to the fact that there still remains a tremendous number of paranormal accounts from reliable witnesses and with, as of yet, undeniable data. Accounts which are qualitatively different from hoaxes or overactive imaginations. And granted, we have only one planet to derive our data from, but something intuitive in me still seems to scream, this is just high strangeness. And that actually was what J. Allen Hynek was referring to when he coined the phrase high strangeness. When you have such diverse weirdness that it seems statistically odd that it would happen. And most rational people would assume that several odd occurrences connected together, in this case on the same planet and at the same time, would likely be tied to a common cause of some sort. And again, I agree with Hynek. This doesn't prove anything weird. It's just intuitively puzzling on several levels, I think. For example, if I went to the ER with a high fever, heart palpitations, upset stomach, and a rash on my face, I have to admit I'm old, and it's possible this may happen someday, but my first assumption is always going to be there has to be just a common factor to this. What are the chances that I would have this many different things happening to me at once? So yes, it could happen, but the statistical side of me said that's just not very likely. And this is actually a classical problem in logic. William of Ockham, you've probably heard, back in the 14th century, came up with the razor, he called it, Occam's razor. And this tells us that anytime you're analyzing an event or problem, it's good practice to start with an explanation that has the simplest action with the fewest components involved. And now, obviously, no philosopher or scientist would say this explains every event, but it is a good starting point because it's useful and it allows us to take what usually happens, which is the simplest explanation of what we see happening, not the most complicated. So, back to the ER scenario. I could have been having a heart attack and had a flu virus and a different stomach virus and an acne breakout all at the same time. But again, statistically, something in me just says it probably is some common agent. So the causal agent, instead of being 5 different ones, there is one single causal agent that's causing all of these things to happen. That's the probability anyway. And I think this at least has to come into play when we explore modern-day paranormal phenomena. Are we really ready to conclude that Earth just happens to randomly win the lottery of dozens of different paranormal phenomena? Or is it more likely that this diversity of phenomena has a common connection of some sort? So, some possibilities that some people have proposed. Could it be that there's a paranormal booking agency out there somewhere that's just simply identified humans and Earth as an easy target for weirdness or something? Or is there a common portal to a weird dimension that's allowing every paranormal thing to pass into the Earth somewhere? So all the skinwalkers, ghosts, aliens, Mothman, you name it, Sasquatches. They're all coming from a different dimension that obviously must be much stranger than what Earth is. So, if these proposals depend on reality beyond present abilities to prove, may I throw another proposition into this arena of ideas? What about the biblical view, or what we would call the Ephesians Hypothesis? And for any skeptics listening, just hang on and consider what I've proposed here. Even if it sounds too simplistic, doesn't it seem to fit the observations? What Stephen Hawking might say, it fits more elegantly than some other explanations, more than a hodgepodge of different, unrelated phenomena, or what Occam might just say was just strictly logical to think of that. And I believe the high strangeness and presumed randomness we see across all the alleged paranormal phenomena does have a common source. The fallen entities described in Scripture, they have the common goal of opposing God's kingdom by spreading false beliefs about reality in whatever way works. Now, what about the diversity and perceived randomness of all this supernatural and paranormal stuff? I believe that's simply a function of our own humanness more than anything else. We aren't one-size-fits-all beings. Humans have different preferences and experiences. I've spent most of my life dealing with science, so if a fallen spirit wanted to deceive me, I think I would be much more interested in UFOs than in ghosts or fairies or something. Others may lean more toward mysterious or fascinated cryptids, and still others may tend to go towards psychic abilities or the occult. And doesn't this better explain the diversity within paranormal genres? Do we really have that many alien species vying for Earth? I mean, we have stories about the Greys, the Whites, the Nords, the Insectolans, the Reptoids, the good ETs, the bad ETs, nuts and bolts spacecraft, saucers, fuzzy orbs, boomerang-shaped craft, you name it, it's out there somewhere. And above all, why is the message the same for ghosts, ETs, cryptids, and everything paranormal? It's something like, I know what I saw, and reality must not be what I thought. I know what I saw, and it changes everything I thought I knew. And I know what I saw, and if that's true, then the Bible must be false.